From Neural Newscast, I'm Frederick Moore.
And I'm Thatcher Collins.
Today, January 20th, stands as a cornerstone of the American democratic process. Since 1937, this date has marked the transition of executive power. Now, we look back at Franklin D. Roosevelt, who was the first president to be sworn in on this specific day following the adoption of the 20th Amendment. Before that change in 1933, the nation waited until March 4th to see a new administration take the helm. This shift was designed to shorten the lame duck period, providing a more efficient transfer of responsibility in a rapidly changing world.
Right. The atmosphere of these inaugurations often captures the collective spirit of an era. Today marks the anniversary of John F. Kennedy's 1961 address, a moment frozen in time by a heavy snowfall and the striking clarity of his call to service. Kennedy was the youngest candidate ever elected to the presidency, and his declaration that the torch had been passed to a new generation of Americans continues to resonate. Decades later, this same date saw Barack Obama sworn in as the first black president in 2009 and Donald Trump in 2017, each ceremony reflecting the diverse and often divided currents of the American public.
While the inauguration is a symbol of domestic stability, January 20th has also been a day of immense geopolitical relief. In 1981, minutes after the presidency passed from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan, 52 Americans were released from Iran. They had been held hostage for 444 days after the seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. The timing of their release was no accident. It was a final, calculated diplomatic move by the Iranian government as the leadership in Washington changed hands.
Yeah, the images of those freed captives arriving at the Rhein-Main Air Force Base in Germany remain some of the most powerful photographs of the late 20th century. It was a moment of profound human drama, ending a standoff that had paralyzed the Carter administration and shifted the landscape of Middle Eastern relations. The release brought a sense of closure to a national trauma that had dominated news cycles for over a year.
Transitioning from the American experience to the British crown, January 20th marks a significant and somewhat controversial departure in royal history. In 1936, King George V died at Sandringham House. For decades, the public believed he passed away peacefully from natural causes. However, later disclosures from the diary of his physician, Lord Dawson, revealed a different story. Dawson admitted to injecting the king with lethal doses of morphine and cocaine to hasten his death, both to preserve the monarch's dignity and to ensure the announcement made the morning edition of the Times.
That medical intervention led to the brief and turbulent reign of Edward VIII, who would abdicate just 11 months later. But the history of the British Empire on this day goes even further back. Today is also the anniversary of the 1841 cession of Hong Kong Island. During the First Opium War, China ceded the territory to Great Britain under the Chuenpi Convention. It was the beginning of a colonial era that would last for over a century and a half until the territory finally returned to Chinese control in 1997.
While we discuss historical transitions, we must also acknowledge the darker milestones reached on this date. In 1942, high-ranking Nazi officials met at a villa in the Berlin suburb of Wannsee. There, they coordinated the implementation of what they termed the final solution. It was a chillingly bureaucratic meeting that formalized the systemic genocide of the Jewish people across Europe. Understanding the cold efficiency of that conference remains vital for historical accountability.
Turning toward the pursuit of justice and social progress, today marks the first time the United States observed a federal holiday in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. back in 1986. It took years of advocacy to secure that recognition for the slain civil rights leader. On the same day in 1971, the cultural landscape shifted when Marvin Gaye released his iconic single, "What's Going On?" The song was a departure from the typical Motown sound, offering a soulful, poignant critique of war and social injustice that remains relevant today.
The legal system also saw a massive movement today in 2011 when federal authorities executed one of the largest mafia takedowns in the history of the FBI. Over 120 suspected mobsters were charged in a coordinated sweep across the Northeast, targeting decades of extortion and violence. It serves as a reminder of the long arc of investigative work required to dismantle entrenched criminal organizations. From the halls of the Capitol to the streets of New York, January 20th continues to be a date where history is written in bold strokes.
It is a day that reminds us how much can change in a single afternoon, whether through a transition of power, a release from captivity, or a shift in the cultural zeitgeist. I'm Thatcher Collins.
And I'm Frederick Moore. Thank you for joining us. For more stories like these, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Neural Newscast is AI-assisted, human-reviewed. View our AI transparency policy at neuralnewscast.com.